As Americans have the capacity now, as we've had in the past, to do whatever needs to be done to preserve this last and greatest bastion of freedom. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, we haven't taken a poll, but it's possible on this Thursday evening you may be wondering what the hell is going on in our country. There are so many unanswered questions, some of them lingering. How, for example, did senile hermit Joe Biden get 15 million more votes than his former boss, rock star crowd surfer Barack Obama? Results like that would seem to defy the laws of known physics and qualify instead as a miracle. Was the 2020 election a miracle? Honestly, we don't know. We don't expect to get an answer to it tonight. So let's move instead to more immediate questions, like all these weird things shooting through the sky over the United States and Canada that nobody seems able to positively identify. Should we be worried about these things? And then what about our infrastructure? The steel and concrete parts of America that the Biden administration has shown strange contempt for, possibly because they were built by those dreaded white construction workers that Mayor Pete dislikes so much. Our critical infrastructure appears to be falling apart. Is that a problem? Or can we, in the bright new transhumanist future our leaders envision, feed ourselves with McKinsey consultants alone? And if we can, how do they taste? You may be wondering all of this, or maybe you're not wondering any of it because you have no clue what we're talking about because the media hasn't told you about it. A press corps that's willing to spend a full week ignoring a toxic mushroom cloud over Ohio will ignore pretty much anything. So in case you're not up to date, here's a partial recap of events. Last night, there was a massive and as yet unexplained fire at a plant nursery just south of Orlando. The fire burned more than 2 acres of plastic planters. Now, burning plastic releases a lot of bad chemicals, including dioxins, which you don't want, and that's why you don't do this in your fireplace. When a single plastic beaker melted in Stanford's science building last year, the school evacuated the area. But outside Orlando, there was no evacuation. Residents were told to stay in their homes. None of the environmentalists in the Biden administration, the people who claim ostentatiously to care about the environment, said anything about it. Nor did they have a lot to say about what happened in Tucson on Tuesday. A tractor trailer carrying nitric acid rolled over on I-10. Nitric acid is a carcinogen. Within 2 hours of the crash, authorities evacuated a small number of residents. They told everybody living within a mile to shelter in place. Then 2 hours after that, they lifted the shelter-in-place order. But then the next morning, authorities announced that they had, quote, reinstated the shelter-in-place order for a 1-mile perimeter around the incident. And then they told residents to, quote, turn off heaters and or air conditioning systems that bring in outside air. Ooh, outside air. No air for you. Well, why did they give this order? Because the first order, it turns out, was wrong. It wasn't safe for people to move back into their homes. So just as in East Palestine, Ohio, authorities, for whatever reason, expose people to dangerous chemicals. If this is incompetence, there seems to be an awful lot of it lately. Then today, it nearly happened again. A freight train derailed about 30 miles west of downtown Detroit. It's a Norfolk Southern train. That's the same company that operated the train that derailed in East Palestine, Ohio. 30 cars went off the tracks. Fortunately, if the information that we are getting tonight is accurate, we can't vouch that it is, the car containing liquid chlorine did not overturn, apparently. So that is, however you slice it, an awful lot of drama on our roads and rails in a single week. Who's in charge of our roads and rails anyway? Well, that would be the Secretary of Transportation. That would be Pete Buttigieg. He's in charge. He was asked about it today. In response, he pointed out that train derailments are not a big deal. Settle down. They're very common. Train derailments happen on average nearly 3 times every day.
Look, rail safety is something that has evolved a lot over the years, but there's clearly more that needs to be done because while this horrible situation has gotten a particularly high amount of attention, there are roughly 1,000 cases a year of a train derailing.
Wait a second. You think East Palestine is a big deal? 1,000 trains derail every year in the United States, says Pete Buttigieg, who presumably has the stats on it. Did you know that? Are you okay with a 1,000 trains a year derailing in your country? Don't a lot of these trains carry highly dangerous chemicals through highly populated areas? Yeah. So if you were Pete Buttigieg, put yourself in his tiny position for a moment. If you were him, wouldn't fixing that, this ongoing disaster, be your very first priority? Well, of course it would be, but you're not Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg doesn't care about trains derailing. He cares about equity. Trains derailing, that's fine. You're fine. You're so fine that the people who show up to test the air and the water after a train derailment are wearing hazmat suits, because the air and water are perfectly safe as long as you're wearing a hazmat suit. See? There's a simple solution to this. Stop whining. Now, what does Norfolk Southern think of all this? We'd love to know, but we don't know because the company skipped the town hall last night in East Palestine, Ohio. Hundreds of locals had gathered to ask obvious and, for them, pressing questions like, why are thousands of fish and animals dying? Why? But executives at Norfolk Southern didn't show up at the event. Why? Because they were worried for their own safety.
Why is the company not here?
Because they're scared for their safety.
Hundreds of anxious residents packed a school gym here in East Palestine on Wednesday night, looking for answers almost 2 weeks after a huge train derailment released hazardous chemicals into their town, contaminating much of the surrounding area. But there were notable absences from the town hall meeting, including the rail operator, Norfolk Southern. Also not attending, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. The mayor says he's had limited contact with the White House, leaving folks here frustrated, angry, and complaining about a lack of information from the feds and Norfolk Southern. State officials and the EPA say the water and air are both safe, but residents here tell a different story. They say they've been getting sick, and so have their pets.
It's so safe, we're not going there. Our oxygen tanks are empty. And by the way, there are elderly, low-income people on crutches there. We don't feel safe around them. But from the perspective of the people who live in East Palestine, it looks a little different. You would think if you live in the United States and you send by force at gunpoint half of your annual pay to Washington, someone in Washington would care when your town is poisoned by a train derailment. Oh, but you thought wrong. Who do you think you are, Ukrainian? Nobody cares about you. Is this Kyiv? No, it's Ohio. Shut up. The Biden administration has other priorities, by the way, like shooting down $300 weather balloons with $400,000 missiles. And yes, apparently they did that. Joe Biden himself admitted it today.
We don't yet know exactly what these three objects were, but nothing right now suggests they were related to China's spy balloon program or that they were surveillance vehicles from any other country. The intelligence community's current assessment is that these three objects were most likely balloons tied to private companies, recreation or research institutions studying weather or conducting other scientific research.
That's the quote. Intelligence community, air quotes now required. That's the intelligence community's assessment. Oh, their kids sent a balloon up and we sent a Sidewinder after it. Mission accomplished. A lot of questions that emanate quite naturally from that bewildering announcement, but Joe Biden didn't take any of them. He scampered off without taking questions. Be gone, serfs! Like Norfolk Southern and Mayor Pete, Biden knows he doesn't have to answer the questions because what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Well, actually, they're starting to worry a little bit about what you might do about it. The people in charge are stupid, obviously, but they're not so dim they don't understand the consequences of serially mistreating the country over a period of many years. They're starting to get worried. They are afraid of the people they govern. How do we know that? Because they're moving at high speed to disarm the people they govern. Here's plastic surgery model Gavin Newsom of California last month.
We've chosen this. This is our decision to live in these conditions. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So we've chosen this. We've accepted this. We can sit there and say thoughts and prayers, or we can look in the mirror and say, this is the price, I guess, of whatever. Fill in the blank. Freedom. This is the price. I get freedom. Freedom from what?
Prayer? How stupid is prayer? Says Gavin Newsom. People who pray are idiots. I'm the only God here. Bow down before me. You can no longer defend yourselves. Only I have the right to defend your life. Now think about that for a minute. It's not a reassuring message, really. Anyone who strips you of your basic God-given right to self-defense is probably not your friend. And anyone who does it in a moment of chaos like the ones we're living through chaos that people like Gavin Newsom caused on purpose. Anyone who does that is probably your blood enemy. But Gavin Newsom is not alone. Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan has the very same message. Stop praying and obey. Watch.
Firearms are getting more dangerous too, thanks to 3D printed technology called Glock switches that turn semi-automatic weapons fully automatic. That's why we launched Operation Safe Neighborhoods, taking hundreds of illegal firearms off the street before they could be used in the commission of a crime. But we must do more. So the world our kids inherit is not more violent than the one we inhabit now. The time for only thoughts and prayers is over.
Another low IQ plastic surgery disaster lecturing us about things she has no understanding of. So laugh at Gretchen Whitmer if you will. But then think about what she's saying. She's mocking prayer. Really? Well, now that you mention it, Gretchen Whitmer, we might use a little prayer right now. Prayers work better than equity. Prayers are safer than Norfolk Southern. Prayers are more comforting than Kamala Harris's laugh. There's nothing wrong with prayers. What we don't need any more of is more totalitarian atheists with ill-gotten political power and designs on our lives. We've got enough of those, including you. So when they're telling you that the two things you cannot have are guns and prayer, you know for a fact that those are the two things you need most. And we're seeing a lot of evidence of that lately. Abandoned by their government to a world politicians have intentionally made chaotic, Americans are protecting themselves. They have no choice. Here's one recent and inspiring example from the state of Arizona.
If he hadn't had a gun, my gun never would have come out. Ever. That's all there is to it.
Brian says it was around 5:15 Wednesday morning when the suspect walked into the Chevron where he works the graveyard shift.
But I could hear him say, money, so. But in all reality, he didn't need to say anything. The moment he pointed the gun at me, it was pretty obvious what he was there for.
Suspect pointed the gun at Brian, but then Brian says he turned and pointed the weapon at a customer. Police confirm that's when Brian took action.
When he turned around, the clerk got out his own firearm and shot the suspect and was able to defend himself at that time.
I'm supposed to relieve him, and I saw everything, and I go, oh my God. But luckily, the other employee is okay.
Had the suspect walked in 30 minutes later, Brian says his coworker would have been behind the register. As terrifying as the situation was, he's glad he was the one to be there.
We're living through the most political moment in American history, but stories like the one you just saw transcend politics. We don't know who anyone in that tape voted for, but we know exactly how they felt as human beings, afraid and alone. And that's what happens when the government ceases conducting its most basic duty, which is to protect its citizens. And they won't. They won't protect you. They've said that out loud, and everybody knows it. Again, no matter who they voted for. And so increasingly, Americans are having to defend themselves. And once again, anyone who tells you you can't defend yourself is your enemy. So here's an example that is amazing, and we think you'll agree that it is. In Tampa last month, a woman called Nishali Alma was working out in her apartment complex's gym. And because she's a kind person, she let in a man who was trying to open the door. That man then attempted to rape her. You're seeing the footage on your screen right now. Now, Nishali Alma did not have a gun. She was in a gym, but she's extraordinarily tough, and she was able to fight off the man who was trying to rape her. His name is Xavier Thomas Jones. Thomas Jones was later arrested after he tried to rape another woman in the apartment complex. The resilience and the strength you see in that video is so inspiring and so perfectly captures the best part of America that we wanted to speak to Nishali Alma tonight, and she was gracious enough to agree. She joins us now. Nishali, thank you so much for coming on. Anyone who watches that video, and again, it's not a political point, but just has to stand back in awe at your ferocity. How did you summon this? So this man is bigger than you, and he's totally determined to hurt you, and you literally fought him off. What were you thinking?
In my head, whenever it was happening, I wasn't really fearful at all. In my head, it was just, I got to fight him. I got to do something, and he was equal to me. He wasn't bigger than me. He wasn't anything more than my size. And I kind of took that to my advantage, to my own head, and I fought him.
There's a moment in the tape I've watched like 4 times. It's so interesting. He comes towards you, and he hasn't even grabbed you yet, and you determine this guy is going to hurt me, he's an enemy, you don't lie to yourself, you just immediately go after him. Why? And a lot of people don't do that. They lie to themselves. Why were you able to know exactly what this man's intention was?
Right. It's because my mom always told me, don't let anybody ever approach you or touch you if you don't know them. And as soon as he approached me, I knew I had to push him off or do something.
Yeah, well, you certainly did do something. And the guy just finally gave, you were so ferocious with him that he just finally gave up.
Yeah. After a little bit of wrestling on the ground, I yanked out his beard hairs and he eventually gave out.
So what, I mean, this is the scene I think that a lot of people, women particularly, fear. You're alone in the gym at night and some rapist comes in and tries to literally rape you. What advice, having lived through it, would you give people watching?
You know, like I said, some people forget their key fob and they do let people in for their kindness of their hearts, but always be cautious, always watch your back. And if you're ever in that situation, fight back.
Amen. Amen. Fight back. That is, it's just wonderful. But thank you for what you did, and congratulations on succeeding.
Thank you.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out patience, worn out faces, bright and early in their daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses, no expression, no expression. Hide my head, I wanna drown my soul.